Hello, good morning. Pretty tough acts to follow here. Thanks, Wild Digital, for conveniently sliding me right after probably two of the most interesting speeches. What I'm here to talk about today is Uber and the future of cities. What I mean by this is the impact that we've had in the transportation and the mobility space in 400 plus cities around the world, I think has been something that we did not even expect from the get-go when we launched 6 years ago, and I want to talk a little bit about what I mean by that. Just before I get started, I always love to, when I'm standing in front of a room, ask for a quick show of hands. How many of you have the Uber app downloaded on your phone? And can you please keep your hand up if you have actually tried the Uber service in the last month? All right. How many of you have tried, how many of you have ridden Uber today? Ooh, we got some work to do here. All right, so for the select few of you who did not raise your hand, the Uber app experience is quite simple, especially for the rider. You push a button, you get a car, and you ride, and you can track your experience, and then afterwards you rate. Now, over the last 6 years that we've been in operation, the user interface has changed quite a bit. There's been new features introduced, but the very idea, the product principle of just pushing one button, or maybe two buttons, and then getting a ride within 5 minutes, that hasn't changed. And I think it's this simplicity and this adherence to that product principle that has helped us expand and grow to over 400 cities around the world. 6 years ago, we were in San Francisco, and that was the only city. Over the last 5-6 years, we've expanded to 70-plus countries and 600 or 400 cities around the world. And I'm going to talk about some of the impact that I think we've been able to achieve in these cities that we serve, and looking forward what that means. How does Uber make cities better? Improving safety, especially around reducing drunk driving, creating economic opportunities, complementing public transit, and this is one that many people find surprising, and cutting congestion and pollution. I'm going to talk about each one of these four aspects that I believe we're making a big difference in. Reducing drunk driving, if we look at the demand and the activity on our app throughout the course of the day, and then we juxtapose that with the black chart there, which is alcohol-related fatalities on the road, it's almost neck and neck. And it's not very surprising that when we first launch in a city, the most obvious use case is when you go out in town for a drink or two, it's the safest way to get home, and it provides an alternative for you to get home safely rather than driving yourself. And so we do things like this Get Home Safe campaign, which is basically in Talksbox is what we call it, a breathalyzer that's branded, sitting outside of different bars, and if you take the breathalyzer test, and if you're over a certain limit, we give you a ride home for free. And I think this is a nice little marketing campaign, but also an education process that there is this new option in town. There's this new option that allows you to not have to drive home and risk getting into an accident. And of course, the way we think about safety is both before and after the trip, where we give you all sorts of different transparencies and visibility into your trip, giving you the opportunity to share your trip with your loved ones, so that God forbid something happens, your husband and your son or your daughter can track where you are in real time, who you're with, what your car license plate is. And these are just simple features that just didn't exist in transportation before, just short 5 years ago. And I think we're just trying to have the best and the safest standards in the transportation industry. And I think it's features like these that really give us a way to provide safer transportation in different countries around the world. Creating economic opportunities. It's flexible work on demand. On the rider side, it's very obvious what you get. On demand, you get transportation. On the driver side, it's on demand, flexible work. And flexible is the key word there, where a lot of people find this surprising. In Malaysia, for example, 60% of our driver partners drive less than 10 hours a week. A lot of people think this is a full-time job, and the beauty of it is you can turn it on and off whenever you want, wherever you want, for how long ever you want. And the stories are amazing. Just on my way over here this morning, I was talking to my Uber driver partner, and he was saying, hey, I actually have admission to this conference. Maybe I should just stop working and just come attend. And I was telling him when I was speaking, I'm not sure if he's in the crowd here, but just that flexibility that you get, that you can turn it off anytime. And before, in transportation or similar industries, a mother of three, like Sue in the middle here, who has commitments to her family and has to take care of her kids and send them to school, this kind of job or earning opportunity just wasn't there before. And I think it's this type of flexibility that's allowing us to grow our business and grow our driver base. Complementing public transport, this is a big one. So this map is a mapping of all trips that start or end near a public transit stop in KL, or in Klang Valley. And the trips represented here are 20% of our total trips in this city. What that means is that we're connecting public transit, we're connecting that first and last mile by bringing you to your doorstep or from your doorstep to the public transit stop. And a lot of people say, well, what about cities where public transit is a little more developed and more widely adopted? In a place like Singapore, that number, that 20% I was talking about, is 30%. And so even when you have a very widely adopted public transit system, it turns out people actually use Uber more to connect the first and the last mile. And it's things like this that really give us encouragement and validation that we are complementing public transit. We're complementing this experience that 90% of the time gets you almost there, and we need to connect that first and last mile. And I think it's a very important step and a role that we play in hopefully reducing car ownership and congestion in the future. How about connecting communities that are underserved? So this is a map of London, and all of those trips in blue are trips that start or end outside of zones 1 and 2. And this represents about 20% of our total trips in London. And what that says is these are neighborhoods, these are zones where public transit can't reach, and your options are pretty much driving yourself, no matter how late at night or how many drinks you've had, and we're starting to connect these communities together. Same concept in Jakarta, 24%. And it's actually really amazing. Jakarta actually has one of the longest trip durations in the world for our business. And it's because all of these folks are using Uber to go from Sudirman or CBD out to the outer city areas. So these are all data that we have that we can look at and validate for ourselves. But independent research firms and research associations have started to confirm our beliefs as well. And on the left is the American Public Transportation Association, who basically concluded, among other things, that the people who use ride sharing are more likely to use other forms of public transport. Why? As I said, we complement this experience, we make that experience better, and if you have the option of using public transport maybe during the day, and then after the trains or buses get cut off, you use Uber to get home. And these are similar, some obvious use cases where we start to make that experience better. In Malaysia, Frost & Sullivan, a research firm, recently came out. This is actually a study that we didn't even know existed until it published a couple of weeks ago. Turns out the majority of Uber users in Malaysia are car owners. And when asked why they use Uber, even though they have their own car, they cite things like, well, parking is a pain. I don't want to look for parking and lose times of the day. And so what this tells us is that people are starting to use Uber and then keeping their cars at home. So maybe over time, they sell a car. In fact, one of our employees here in Malaysia sold his car and his wife's car in the first 2 months on the job. And so we're starting to sort of tell this narrative and start to show that car ownership need not be. That brings me to our final point, cutting congestion and pollution. Simply put, this is about moving more people with fewer cars. And our solution to this is called Uberpool. Some of you may not know Uberpool. Some of you maybe have tried Uberpool in one of our 30 cities around the world that we've launched the service, but it's basically carpool on demand. How does it work? So these are two separate hypothetical trips on the Uber platform. As the platform gets more and more popular in a city and more widely adopted, the likelihood that these similar trips with a similar route are occurring at the same time increases. And after we've kind of reached that level of liquidity, we say, oh, sorry. Apologize. Bear with me a second. We say, what if we can combine these two trips into one car? Car picks up passenger 1, car picks up passenger 2, similar route, and then drops off each of the passengers. It's more people, fewer cars, or the same number of people, fewer cars, efficiency. And some of you may be wondering, well, that's just carpool. I get carpool. And you're right. It's not a new concept. It's actually, carpool is a concept that cities and governments have been trying to evangelize for years and years and years to cut congestion and pollution. But now, what's been missing this entire time has been technology. And a platform like this, platform like Uber, that can coordinate the matching of these two similar trips and allow you to share that car and cutting cost, cutting the fares, and meanwhile the driver doesn't care because he's collecting fares from two people, or two parties. That was just the theory, though. We launched a year and a half ago in our first city in Uberpool. And this map is, on the right there is Uberpool trips in Shanghai, and a visualization of all the trips that are happening on Uberpool each day. The intensity of the light is the density of the cars on Uberpool trips. And on the left there is a simulation of the exact same trips if they were hypothetically in separate cars. The story is very clear, right? We're moving more people in fewer cars. In the case of Los Angeles, traditionally a very driving city where people pride themselves on driving themselves on owning a car, in the first 8 months of launching Uberpool, we estimate that we've removed about 12 million kilometers of driving by using fewer cars to move the same amount of people, and over 1,000 metric tons of carbon emissions saved. And that's just in the first 8 months. It's grown rapidly since, and of course this amount is a lot bigger now. In China, there's 30 million Uberpool trips happening every month, and rapidly growing. And globally, as I mentioned, it's only been a year and a half out of the 6 years that we've been in business that we've launched Uberpool, and only 30 cities out of 400 cities around the world, less than 10% of our cities have this product, and yet it's 20% of our total global trips. And I think it's stats like this, it's data like this that really gives us confidence that Uberpool is a real thing. We've proven the concept. And in Southeast Asia, where we know that congestion is a big issue, we've launched our first city in Jakarta a couple of weeks ago. We're going to have a couple more coming in the next month or so. I'm really excited to see what kind of impact that we can make, because with this technology, with this coordination of the matching that I talk about, I think is the future of mobility, future of on-demand transport, and the future of smarter cities, especially in this region where we know the impact that we can make in terms of carbon emissions saved, congestions removed, is greater than most regions around the world. And so that's a little bit about how Uber and we think about the future of cities, what role we can play in it. And I always tell people this is not, no one company can make the difference all by itself, but it is a critical role to evangelize sharing of cars, sharing of rides, and it's technology, it's the matching technology that we provide that I hope can tell that story further and improve the concept in this region as well. Thank you very much.